SEC win totals are out at FanDuel, and that means we just dive right in. Strength of conference, man. Look at this thing. There's no team above 10.5, and you may think that doesn't mean you're strong. If you were a strong conference, wouldn't you have some teams in the 11 or 12 category? I'm not finished. Don't interrupt me. Yes, there are no teams with a win total above 10.5, but there are half a dozen of them at 10.5 or 9.5. And for those of you unfamiliar, this is literally the easiest thing to understand in betting. The number on your screen right now, or if you're listening on podcast, the number I tell you, you can do one of two things. You can either bet over or under. And if they win more and you bet over, you win. And if they go under the number and you bet over, I made that sound a lot more difficult than it should be. You're just betting how many games these teams are going to win. That's it. That's all. Georgia's 10.5. Texas is 10.5. Those are the two big dogs in the totals market, at least in the preseason for the SEC. You got 5 teams in the conference at 5.5 wins or worse. Okay, so it's not surprising Georgia would be up there. But remember now, Georgia, you've been used to seeing them with an 11 or 11.5. Schedule's much tougher this year. And that's going to be the case virtually across the board in the SEC and in many cases the Big Ten as well. But look at the overall landscape here. Okay, so you got Texas at 10.5. To give you an idea of the Texas OU dynamic, those are the two newcomers. Texas at 10.5, that is a massively high number for anybody in the SEC at any point, but especially the new look SEC. And when you're the newcomer, that's a big deal. So that's definitely a testament to the program they've built there. Oklahoma's at 7.5. And it's juiced to the under, so they've probably been taking action on the under there. I think a lot of that has to do with the offensive line situation, but, you got Jackson Arnold there. You've got a lot of positive energy around the program. It's hard to win a bunch of games in the SEC. In the 8.5 barrel, there are several teams down here. Tennessee, for example, over under 8.5. There's a path to 9-3 here. They avoid 4 of the 6 SEC teams with higher win totals than them. They got Chattanooga, but they play NC State. NC State is one of the best teams in the country. At least they're going to be up there in the odds market. So NC State, they play in Charlotte in week 2 after the in-state rivalry against the Mocs of Chattanooga. Texas A&M's here. Texas A&M still got a top 10 talent roster. They are 18th in Bill Connolly's returning production metrics. They got Notre Dame. They got Texas, they got LSU, they got Missouri. You win one of those, rest of the schedule is doable if you're trying to paint the path to over 8.5 wins. And that's just the early look at it. Obviously, we got several months to break that down in finer detail. The 9.5 barrel, though, is what I wanted to talk about. All the teams I'm about to mention are over under 9.5 wins. And, buddy, it's some of the usual suspects, and it's some newcomers to the dance. Alabama's at 9.5 wins. So you may think to yourself, well, that's low. Yeah, it is low, relatively speaking. It's low for Bama. It's their lowest preseason win total since 2007. They got Georgia. Bama plays Wisconsin on the road this upcoming year. They got that. They go to LSU. They go to Oklahoma the week before the Iron Bowl. They go to Tennessee. They got Missouri. Obviously, an entirely new coaching staff here. It's a new era. We're going to talk about a little bit of that later in the show. What you think? 9.5. Honestly, I would, if you made me bet one way or the other, may lean under at the moment. It's just hard to do, man. There's a lot of transition there. It's hard to do. What's realistic? What's realistic to expect with Alabama? That word doesn't exist right now. I'm going to talk about that more later in the show. Ole Miss, path is there now. Over under 9.5 wins. They only play 2 of the top 8 teams in the conference when it comes to the preseason win totals market. Non-conference, Furman, Middle Tennessee, at Wake, Georgia Southern, they should be 4-0 in those games. They should open conference play 4-0, and they'll be favored against Kentucky and South Carolina. They'll be favored to be 6-0 when they go to LSU, October 12th, unless something drastic changes. But then, as is usually the case with Ole Miss, it really turns the volume up in a hurry. LSU, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State. So it gets a little tougher on the back end, but again, by SEC standards, Ole Miss has about as manageable a slate this year, especially when you consider the roster they put together as anyone. Missouri. All right. Now, there's a lot of talk around the water cooler that Missouri was a flash in the pan. Not our water cooler per se, but there's several water coolers out there. We got to stay hydrated. And yet Vegas says, well, if you believe that, here's some free money. Over under 9.5. They are one of 5 teams with a win total at 9.5 or higher. Man, I look at the defensive talent they lost, not on the field, the coaching staff. And I know that a lot of attention is paid to who walks out the door, Blake Baker and Kevin Peoples, and you don't pay so much attention to who walks in the door. Eli Drinkwitz has been able to hire. We talked all August about how one of the key underrated aspects of that team was they had a top 25 coaching staff last year going into the season. And, I can't prove that's the difference in close games, but you'd certainly be hard-pressed to convince me it wasn't. They opened with Murray State. They got Buffalo. They got Boston College. And then they go to Vanderbilt. They got Vanderbilt coming in. They go to UMass as well. They are another team that should absolutely be 4-0 in their non-conference schedule. And so what are you looking at? You're looking at what you can do in conference play. That's going to be one of the most fun teams in the country to watch. LSU, total wildcard team. They got a tough non-conference schedule. Unlike some of these other folks, LSU is opening in Vegas, I believe, on a Sunday night against USC. That's their opener. And then they have Nichols in week 2 before they open conference play. They also have UCLA come to town and South Alabama. 2 teams that all of a sudden were in need of new head coaches, by the way. I could see 11-2 here. You could sell me on the fact that the defensive staff is not able to get much out of that talent roster year 1, and maybe they're 7-5. It's a high ceiling, low floor team. Year 3 under Brian Kelly. So that's, again, it's February. It's February. Everyone settle down so we can afford to be kind of wishy-washy on what we expect right now. Oh, Florida. Oh, Florida. Number's too high. The over-under win total for Florida's 5.5. It's too high. This may be the toughest schedule I've ever seen in college football. I want you to wrap your mind around what I'm about to tell you. Florida plays 8 teams this season with a preseason win total of 8.5 or higher. I've never seen that before. I do not remember ever seeing that before. And that 5.5 is going to be extremely tough to get. There's a world, when you consider who all they play, there's a world where Florida is the 20th best team in the country this year. And you may think to yourself, man, no one who's the 20th best team in the country would ever fire their head coach, right? Let me finish again. There's a world where they're the 20th best team in the country and they go like 6-6. Like there's a world where if they are just full truth is known, they're the 20th best team in the country, they would be expected to be a 500 team with this schedule. You aren't always what your record says you are. Sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't. So prayers up for the Gators. Vanderbilt, we are a team. We are a show that really loves to support the overs market when it comes to Vandy, and it's 2.5. And I want you to listen to me, and I really want you guys about 5 or 6 blocks away to listen to me because that's where the campus is. They play Alcorn State, Georgia State, Ball State. If we win those games, we hit the over. That's all we have to do, right, Jesse? Isn't it 2.5? That's all we have to do. Oh, it sounds so easy. We could go winless in conference, guys. All we have to do, Alcorn, Georgia State, Ball State, 3-0, we're good. Now, that's not the message I would be preaching internally over there, but we're good. And yet, still, it's a treacherous task. So that's the SEC win totals market right now. Be careful. You don't have to dive in fully if you're going to. Do it at FanDuel. You don't have to dive in fully right now.